Here we go. Yes, people. Welcome again to another Black Eyes TV production. We're going in this week, their information. And today's show is just the same, loaded. Got two nice guests on, and the title of the show today is The Legacy in the DNA. UK to USA link-up show, as you know we like to do. Bring our cousins and brothers and sisters from across the pond. But before we get into that and they introduce themselves, let me speak to my co-host, Mr. Riggsy. Speak to the people then.
Welcome. Loving my family always, as we all introduce you to two spectacular people that are going to give us beautiful information. As I said, come to the light, because you know why? This is the hidden secrets that people have been researching behind the scenes and now been seeing things that they've been stepping upon. Now it's information for you to be able to research yourself and to find yourself and your path and your journey. As this is a Black Eyes production, and we have two beautiful people today. Richie, let's begin this hard workout. Now, we're introducing the beautiful lady that we have here, because we know we have to have a form of balance, because I think it's about 3 males here today, but we have the beautiful Donya.
Hi.
How are you today?
I'm fine. How are you?
Okay. Now, I just want you to give us a little insight of who you are and what you're about.
Okay. My name is Donya Williams, and I live in the U.S., and I am a genealogical researcher and I dabble in genetics as well. I've been researching my family for about 25 years, and I just wrote a book that was published on the September 21st, 2017 this year, called Comes to the Light, and it's learning about the entangled families of Edgefield, South Carolina.
Okay. Ryan, introduce yourself and let the public know who you're about, what you're about.
Okay. Hello, my name is Brian SHEFFEY. I'm the host and writer for Genealogy Adventures, which is, I'm hoping to develop that into a TV series with my cousin Donya. Genealogical researcher, do a lot with DNA and genetic genealogy, and dabble with a little bit of history too.
Okay. So now we want to know, what have you lot been up to? Public need to hear what you lot been up to. Someone give us an introduction into how the book has come about and what exactly you have been doing.
And how are you connected?
Exactly.
Let's go straight in. Let's come in.
I heard it's a big family tree out there.
Oh, huge. You have no idea.
Yeah.
So Donnie, do you want to talk a little bit about how you came to write the book?
Well, the book was written because originally I was writing with a book group, and it didn't fan out well, and I ended up having to leave it. And I had a cousin named Sheila who was like, well, you really need to write this because people need to know the stories that you have, because I was sharing a story with her about my mom. And she was like, you have a lot of stories and you really need to write this book. And around the same time, in my mind, I was kind of thinking the same thing that she was saying. So the book was written. And in the process of writing the book is where Brian steps in, because Brian was my editor. He was the one that really helped me spread out my stories, give more information about my stories, and just really tell my journey in a manner that which is what one reviewer on Amazon said, so that they could almost hear my voice. It was, one of them was saying, like, the book lover, I think that's what his thing is, said book was interesting and very encouraging, and he said it was like he loved my presentation, and it was like I was talking to him. And that was my goal, to actually talk to people through my book and explain to them my journey, what I found and what I learned in the process of finding my family.
Okay.
Yeah.
You want to comment on that, B?
Okay. Do you want to go to the next slide?
Okay.
So basically, to answer your second question about how Donnie and I met, we met about 5 or 6 years ago online, not too long after I'd done a DNA test with Ancestry.com. And come to find out that I was a high match with her mother. And it all goes back to a place called Edgefield County, South Carolina, which is probably one of the oldest counties in South Carolina. It goes back to the really early kind of colonial period. And kind of in and amongst, we knew one way that we were already related, but because of the way Edgefield works on both the white side of the family and the black side of the family, everyone was marrying their cousins. We laugh about it now, but there are days when Donya and I are both like, if one more of our ancestors marries their cousin, we really don't know what we're going to do. And are actually related 6 or 7 different ways. I mean, that means that we share 6 to 7 different sets of common ancestors. Because our ancestors just, yeah, they just weren't leaving their cousins alone, kind of a thing. So we have very, very deep roots. For me, Edgefield's on my mother's side of the family. So she and I share very, very deep roots in South Carolina, and even older roots going back to Virginia. And again, we share both Black ancestors and white ancestors, and it all goes back to slavery. So I don't know if you want to hit the next slide. So this is just to give you a really general idea of one of the ways that we're related. I'm just waiting for that slide to pop back up on my phone so I can see it better. Which family is that one, Donya?
This is the Holloway and Peter and Scott and Amanda. So if you can't see it, I can definitely tell them. Basically, Amanda is, if you guys can see the slide, Amanda Peterson is actually Brian's, I believe, 2-time great-grandmother. And Peter Peterson is my 3-time great-grandfather. So he and I actually share Peter Peterson as our 3-time great-grandfather. But if I'm not mistaken, we also share Ned Holloway. Am I correct?
We do indeed.
Yeah. So
these are like two of some of the biggest families in Edgefield. And again, that's the reason why she and I are related in so many different ways, is our family was huge. I mean, they were having like anything from 8 to 15 kids each. So these are 2 of the biggest families. On the next slide, there's 2 more huge families that connect us.
Yes, that's the Settles and the Williams family. Now, I don't know if you noticed it, but on the first slide, I'm gonna go backwards, Brian, for a second. If you guys see the name Moses Williams, when I go back to the other slide, there he is again. Actually, the father to Violet Williams, which makes him our grandfather yet again. This shows the constant, connection when it comes to me and Brian and Horace Settles and so on and so forth, because that's on another side. But yet they continue to overlap. And
yeah. So the word entangled on her entangled is such the perfect description, because as you just seen, one man appears in 2 different slides, uniting 4 different families. That's just that's word.
And it's so funny because a lot of people will make comments and say, well, why are you talking about entangled? And that's why, what Brian just said, because we literally are completely and totally intertwined with each other on so many different ways that DNA sometimes, in my opinion, doesn't even help us to a certain degree, because we don't know which way it's dropping at that moment, or when as we're searching it.
No, that's so true. We know that there's going to be a link somewhere, but we're never really quite sure. And I'll let you discuss this little discovery, Donya.
So the next discovery is our obituary notes, and the obituary notes says Moses Williams, colored, aged 115 years, died in Barnwell, South Carolina yesterday. He was the father of 43 children, all of whom are living, and this was Courier. This is that 1765 Moses Williams that you guys saw in the tree. He is our fourth great grandfather, and when we came across Moses, it was an accident. It was all by accident, because originally I had seen another article while looking for something in newspapers.com. Said this right here: the fecundity of the Negro race has been the subject of much comment and discussion. A case has come to light in this state that is one of the most remarkable on record. Moses Williams, a Negro farmer, lives in the eastern section of this state. He is 65 years old, as nearly as he can make out, but does not appear to be over 50. He has been married twice, and by the two wives has borne to him 45 children. By the first wife, he had 23 children, 20 of whom were girls and 3 were boys. By the second wife, he had 22 children, 20 girls and 2 boys. About 50 grandchildren. The case is well authenticated. So when I saw that, and it threw me off, because originally he has a son named Moses Jr. And I already knew that Moses Jr. was my third great grandfather. So I called Brian and I'm like, you see this? And I showed him the article and he was like, oh my God. And we started to go through and he started to do some research, and that's when he found the obituary note. And when he found the obituary note, that's when we realized, because we saw when he died, this actual thing was written in 1884. Well, we knew that our Moses, the first Moses that we were talking, that we knew we were connected to, which was my third great grandfather, we knew that he was born anywhere between 1790 and 1796. 15 from 1884. You about 30 years off of 1796. And that's when we realized that this was his father. And as we've done our research and gone back, we're realizing that Moses is actually we're trying to find Moses Williams and his 45 children. And this map that you see, these are the steps that Moses took. So
basically,
yeah, go ahead, Brian, take that.
I was going to say, so basically, this is like Moses Williams' life in a snapshot. So we know that he was born in Virginia. We believe he was born in Hanover. Right father, we're still not sure. His mother was enslaved.
Oh, you're cutting out, brother.
What her name?
You're cutting out, Brian.
The white side of the family through.
Brian, can you repeat that? You cut out. He doesn't hear me.
Kind of from Virginia to North Carolina, then from North Carolina to South Carolina.
Brian.
And it's hard for me to kind of express, but
Brian,
what we know about Moses' story, and there's still a lot more to uncover. Mm-hmm.
Brian.
Yes.
Yeah, you was cutting out.
I can hear you.
In that
can you hear me?
Part. Yeah, you was cutting out. Yeah. You was cutting out in the first part of what you were saying. Could you start from the beginning and just go back?
Oh, certainly.
All the first bit was
muddled. Okay. So basically what you're looking at is a snapshot of Moses Williams' kind of life. So we know that he was born in Hanover. And he was enslaved within the same family. He went from Virginia to South Carolina, and this was all during the colonial period. Obviously, he died in South Carolina after people were emancipated. And I had this really, even though we have a lot left to learn about Moses, kind of profound connection to him. Because, I mean, I've researched other enslaved ancestors, but dig through so many things like probate records for the people who.
Yeah, Brian's going in and out.
And kind of really understanding that early part of his history. Because his first enslaver was actually his white father, Daniel Williams II, who was like a Revolutionary War patriot. And it looks as though the Williams had two different classes of slaves. They had slaves that have recognized for family, but they kept those people within the family.
You want me to go to the next one?
I don't, as far as we're aware, they've never really sold those family members out. Oh, I was going to continue. But and then the other class of slaves were, I guess, people that they didn't have a biological connection to, that they sold outside of the family. So Moses's history is really kind of all wrapped up within slavery, and it's all wrapped up within the Williams family. But I kind of have to chuckle, because I'm sure when he was a young man when the American Revolutionary War, he was almost 20 years old. He was growing up hearing all of this stuff about freedom and liberty and the rights of men and all the rest of it. And he had to have known that none of that rhetoric would ever apply to him. And he probably thought he would die a slave. And I kind of have to chuckle, because he outlived everybody. As Donya said, he made it to 1884. So he had freedom. He was surrounded by a lot of his immediate family. He seems to have, but I kind of have to chuckle at his determination. It's like, nope, I'm going to taste freedom. I don't care how long it's going to take. And he did. And it took him 115 years, but he got it. So I don't know if you want to go to the next one. Oh, next slide. Again. So this just gives you an example of the kind of how we were working with slave deeds. So the personal finance that were in who they were going to. And working with records like these kind of reminded me, as Americans, we don't have a framework to discuss slavery. So for me, I refuse to describe my ancestors who were enslaved as slaves, because that kind of when I hear the word slave, I think someone who's docile, who's accepted their kind of state in life, if that makes sense. And I know a lot about what my ancestors were like when they were freed, and they weren't those kind of people. They were all fighters, and they took their freedom and they ran with it. So rather than call them slaves, I call them enslaved. They were enslaved. An injustice was done to them, no matter how they felt about it. And this is something that America is going to have to wrap its head around. We're going to have to figure out a way to discuss the slavery experience, come up with a kind of accepted vocabulary. And I think this needs to be led by African Americans. One thing that Donnie and I talk about a lot is we believe that Black people, we need to reclaim our own narrative. Everyone else has kind of framed our narrative. Arabs have framed our narrative. South Asians have framed. Everywhere we were enslaved, the enslavers frame our narrative and our history. We have to do that for ourselves. We have to take that back. And that includes kind of coming up with a framework to discuss slavery, discuss what was happened, and come up with an accepted vocabulary for it. And working with records like these just kind of really brings that home to me in a really kind of visceral, fundamental way. I'm telling you, nothing will fry your brain more than seeing a price value placed against your ancestor. It's to this day I can't really describe it. There's just so many kind of emotions that kind of goes through me when I think about that. So I don't know if Donnie wants to jump in.
For me, when I first saw my great-great-grandmother and the price that was held over her, she was worth $1,205. And originally, when I first saw that, I really didn't have a feeling. But like Brian said, we kind of got a grasp of how our ancestors were in researching them, because they gave us this feeling, you know, when we were on the right track. We knew we were on the right track because they gave us this particular feeling. So with my great-great-grandmother, Martha Brooks, which is a cousin of Brian's, she gave me a feeling. She let me know when I was going in the way I needed to go. And I think, I know this might sound crazy, but I almost feel like she got kind of angry at me, because I wasn't angry at first when I saw her, how much she was worth. And it took me on a whole nother path. And she wanted me at that point to learn about slavery and to understand what they actually had to go through. And I ended up getting introduced to this book called The House of Bondage by a Black lady, written in 1890, published in 1890. And it was in that book that I learned about this young slave girl called Ella, and how Ella had to she was given to her mistress by her mistress's mother because of whatever reason. And for whatever reason, the mistress just did not like her. She hated her. So for every chance she got, whether it was to knock her in her head, to make her head bleed, hang her by her thumbs all the time, these were things that happened to this little girl as she grew up to be an adult. While she grew up to be an adult, Ella, I guess, caught the eye of the master. And I guess for whatever reason, whether it was a forced relationship or what have you, the mistress didn't like the fact that the master and Ella had some type of relationship. So one day the mistress hung Ella by her thumbs and didn't go back to get her, and she died. And it was at that point when I read that, and I'm like, oh my God, my great-great-grandmother could have gone through this. And then I found a chart. And in finding this chart, I found this chart that gave the amount of what my great-grandmother would have been. And basically, my great-grandmother would have been, during that time, they give a chart that says you're either, what is it? An average man or woman, all the way up to superior. Prices that were listed within those different things. Your book. Your book. There were prices. Your book.
What book?
Your Comes to the Light book.
Oh.
There were prices in between that was ranging from like $500 to $1,250. And Martha was actually worth the amount of what a fine man was. And that's when I got it. And that's when I understood. And I was like, this is crazy. But she was worth that amount because she was a breeder. So then I started to feel it. I started to get angry. I started to understand a little better. And as people read in the book, and she wanted to teach me so much more. And it was through, I honestly can say that it was through my great-great-grandmother that I started to really understand what African Americans had to go through in order to get to where we are now. And I started to appreciate why we have so many, including myself, actually see us going backwards. It was all because of her. I have to credit Martha for that. She did that. She did that. That's pretty much all I can say.
So I guess one last thing about this particular slide. So the Dan Williams II that you're looking at, this is the same man who's Moses Williams Sr.'s father. Generation 3, that just means he was the third generation of the family who actually came from Wales in the United States. So he was, Daniel Williams II was the third generation of a Welsh American family. And then looking at all of those names, Moses Williams Sr. is on this. He's on this deed, as is Moses Williams Jr., his son. And then you start to realize, in terms of Moses Williams Sr., there are going to be other family members of him on this deed. There are going to be other children. There's probably going to be siblings. There's two very old women who are mentioned in this deed. One of those women could act. So basically what we have to do as a team, and there's about 7 or 8 of us working on this.
It's
we have
actually
to trace
6.
each and every, oh, 6. We have to trace each and every one of the people deed, trying to trace them to the 1870 census, which is the first census in America, where Black people were actually listed under their own right, as opposed to slave schedules, which is what they've been listed under before. That's just for enslaved people. Obviously, free people of color, they had census records going back to 1790. But for enslaved people, you're trying to trace only had one name. They may have had a name that they referred to themselves amongst themselves in terms of surnames. But as I said, if you look at all of those names on just this one deed, the whole project team, we have to research each and every one of these, to who they were, if they were related to each other, if they were, how they were related to each other, and figuring out which one of these people are related to Moses Williams. And the next couple of slides just show how we've adapted what you just saw on paper, how we just kind of put that information into ancestry.com. So I probably won't talk about it. But as I said, when you start working through 30, 40, 50 deeds and you start mapping them out on sheets of A4, you've got a team of 6 people, it just wasn't a very efficient way for us to work as a group. So that just gives you kind of an idea of how we put the same information into Ancestry. We can open that up and hopefully get other people to say, oh, I know exactly who that person was.
Okay. So that's our slide. Do you guys have questions?
Definitely. Listen, first of all, thank you for sharing your family history, because again, this isn't just a faceless, nameless trudge along through history or an ambiguous look. This is your actual bloodline and family. So when you're explaining some of the things that your family have gone through and the things you're discovering, again, I appreciate you for talking about it and bringing it to light. And again, I think it's something that we all need to know more about our own family history. And obviously, if people don't understand or realize, Brian is from the UK. He lives out there now. Where was you born, Brian?
Oh, I was born in '66. I was actually born here in the States. I just lived in England for a very long time.
Okay, how long was you in England for before you went back to the States?
Nearly 30 years.
Okay, so a good amount of time.
Yeah, well, I still remember the Margaret Thatcher era, the end of it.
yeah, I remember from our conversation the other day, actually. You was let me know certain things and let me know what eras you was definitely in the country for. But one of the things I want to say, ask is, what was, out of all of that information, what was the hardest part to come across? Like, what was the most painstaking as far as meticulously looking through records when you're looking through that information? Because obviously you spoke about it quite seamlessly, but there must have been points in time where you kind of hit brick walls. So what was the most challenging point through that research?
Well, I would say the most painful for me was reading an account of my 3 times great-grandmother, who was called Louisa Hammond. It was an account in a historical book about how at the age of 12, she was passed back and forth. Well, she was basically raped, but then she was passed back and forth between a father and a son. So even to this day, working with DNA, I don't know which one of the men actually fathered that Hammond line. It's one of the other of them. But you think about it. I mean, I don't, for anyone who's listening to this or viewing this, if you have a 12-year-old daughter or a niece, I want you to look at her and think, if she had been born a slave, with no control over her person or her body, not being able to give consent or assent in any way, shape, or form, not only being sexualized, but being passed back and forth, shared between a father and a son, and having children by the time, starting to have children by the age of 13. That for me was the most painful. I guess in the other way, I've been blessed to have found 4 African ancestors who literally had come off the boat, one in Pennsylvania, the other one's in Virginia, enslaved. But knowing that, when you start getting to enslaved ancestors who were born in like the early 1700s, you're getting close. But those brick walls are just so hard to smash down. So you're close to an African ancestor, but they're just that little bit out of reach. But that's the frustration that keeps me going.
No, definitely.
For me, my brick wall was Martha, and the toughest. She was the toughest for me. Martha set me up. Martha, I don't know. Martha just kind of took me on a whole whirlwind. She's the reason why I know so much. And one of her ways of showing me slavery was again through the book House of Bondage. And I think that one was that, even though it wasn't her story, it was a story that she wanted me to read. And it was about this man who could read and write. And he had a wife who lived on another plantation. It was Richard. And he had a wife who lived on another plantation. And he was writing passes for other African-American slaves to go visit their family, and they found out. And when they found out, the owner literally said to him, "You are smarter than most of the people that are around me. The only place for a good, smart nigger is being a dead nigger." This is what was written in the book. This is something that we've heard so many times before, but yet this was written in a book that was written in 1890. So these things that we hear going on, throughout the years, it's like there's a repetitiveness of it, and it's crazy. But what they did to that man was even more horrifying. Basically, there's this thing called breaking the buck that people have heard about, and breaking the buck is when you tie the man down, literally as if he's on the cross, but he's down on the ground. Each hand is out, each foot is tied out, and you whip them and you beat them naked. This is what they did to these types of slaves. And then afterwards, that's where the hanging of the pants low, because this was allowing other slaves to know that this is what happened to him. And now it can happen to you too. Well, they did this to this man, and they beat him so badly, it was opening up on his back. And as he passed out, they would throw salt water onto his body. This was so excruciating that his eyeball popped out. It was at that point I had to close the book. I did not read it. I did not do anything else with it for about 3 weeks. And that's one of the most eye-opening things that Martha ever showed me. Her guiding me to that book was just unbelievable. And I cannot thank her enough. Even though it was some horrifying stuff that I was reading, I cannot thank her enough, because just as much horrifying stuff that I read, I found some awesome information about African Americans. How we spoke, how we carried ourselves, all of these different things in this book. You have to look at it sometimes and like, was this really written in 1890? Because of the things that's going on in the book. It's amazing. So I think that Martha was my brick wall, and she was also my teacher and giving me some horrifying stuff.
Yeah, definitely. Ooh. Yeah,
But I can also jump in and say the book is called The House of Bondage, the story of Charlotte Brooks, and you can actually read it for free. It's a PDF online. I
Yep.
recommend reading it because it's just such a powerful book.
Yes. Yes.
But one thing that Donnie and I have also talked a lot about that book, and it's called slave narratives. So basically, government people interviewing newly freed slaves, I think within about 10 to
1930.
15-year period after slavery. That was it. And the way that these people were in it, some people spoke that way, but they just, the way that what they were saying was written down made them sound completely illiterate.
Yeah.
Now, I don't, I can imagine people had strong accents and they had colloquial ways. And for you people in the UK, when imagine how people in Yorkshire speak, for instance, or Liverpool. They have their shorthand, they have their kind of little code phrases that they use, or if you go down to Cornwall, hearing people call each other, my petal, flower, all that kind of stuff. But when you read the House of Bondage, the story of Charlotte Brooks, they're speaking what I would say, I don't want to say normal, but traditional.
Yeah.
They're just using commonly referenced everyday language. They didn't sound like I hate to use the expression, but you can imagine the 1920 and 1930 films. They didn't sound like the kind of shucking and jiving and shuffling kind of Negro.
Right.
They could construct a coherent sentence using full words, the lot. And for me, that was eye-opening.
Right. There was one. Go ahead, Brian.
I was just going to say, because it's funny how you get brainwashed without realizing you've been brainwashed. Because I've been this narrative of what Black slaves were like. And then I read that book and I thought, we weren't like that. And part of me knew that, but I didn't realize to what depths I actually accepted the kind of, again, coming back to that owning our narrative, I didn't understand how much of that European-driven narrative I've been led to believe.
Right. So basically what Brian was saying was there's one part where it's in the, like he said, it was in the WPA slave narratives when they talked to this man named Richard Max. And this is what I'm getting ready to read to you is how he was quote unquote speaking. They used to take women from their husbands, put with their other men to just breed like they would do cattle. They'd always kept the man pinned up. They used to stud him like a horse. So that sounds like gibberish to everybody right now, but that's actually not how they spoke. Because there was one person on our Facebook group called Home Place, young lady by the name of Dana. She explained to me that her I don't know if it was her great grandfather or her great great, but she explained to me that while she was doing her research on her great great grandfather, whose name was Holmes, last name was Holmes, she found a slave narrative from him. And she approached her family about it. And when she approached her family about it, she said, "You guys know I'm researching. Why didn't you share this information with me that he had done this?" And the first thing they said was, "You didn't speak like that, so we weren't going to share that." So you like, wow, information not being shared simply because it wasn't him. He was an intelligent man who spoke just fine, who speaks like you and I today. No broken sentences, not they instead of they. He spoke well, and they were upset, and they didn't share that with her because they were like, that's not how he spoke. And it's amazing to me. And that's what we learned in just reading that book. We learned about how, as African Americans during the Reconstruction period, we were truly intelligent people. We became freed, and within 1877, no, I'm gonna go back. After 1865, to a little ways up right before Jim Crow era, we were growing. in less than 50 years. We were growing exponentially. We were doing things that they were looking at us like, hold up, I need y'all to slow down for a minute, because I wasn't expecting this illiterate person to come up and be an educator. I wasn't expecting this illiterate person to come up and be a high-ranking military official, a senator, a representative. What are y'all doing? Skirt! I need you to stop. And that's what the Jim Crow era did. That's what the Jim Crow era came into. That's when they started holding us back, fighting us to vote, because we were able to vote back. And, you know, once the Reconstruction, that was what Reconstruction was about, including everybody. It was about including all. And they couldn't take it. And bam, voting rights were taken. Things started happening once again, and we were kicked right back into slave times.
And again, during our kind of previous conversation the other day, the other thing that really hit me kind of hard about slavery, and that's just to get, you know, apart from the injustice of it, was for me kind of I have two groups of ancestors who were enslaved. Most of them, after the Emancipation Proclamation, they just hit the ground and they just ran.
Yes, Lord.
They took freedom with both hands, and they did something with it. Whether, you know, they bought their own farms, they were business people, teachers, inventors, you name it. There were even a few judges kind of kicking around in that. And it made me realize you were always capable of achieving any of those things. And when I think about the real cost of slavery, and that's apart from the systemic abuses, the evil of it, the real sadness of it is the achievements that could have benefited humanity that's gone for all time. You're in the rice fields, you're a farm worker, you're picking cotton, whatever it is, rain. You're capable of thinking. You're thinking thought. You have, you know, you're thinking thoughts. Oh, well, what if there was an invention that could do this? And you start working that out. Well, you're a slave. You don't have the time or liberty or freedom to be able to develop that. And again, when I'm thinking about people who could have found cures for diseases, new inventions, what kind of intellectual capital has probably been lost for all time because it was locked, enslaved person who didn't have, you know, the support to be able to develop those ideas. And again, I think when people talk about slavery, they talk about the really kind of obvious things. But when you start cycling through those, you start thinking about other aspects and the other kind of costs of slavery. And I guess for me, that one also really hits home.
No, definitely. There's a lot of subtle nuances, as you're saying, that go unnoticed as far as, you know, what we lost during that time. And again, as far as my opinion, I always think it can be regained through the ether, through the bloodline, you know, because the connection is forever moving. But definitely, you know, as you're saying, the narrative is always pushed one way. And I think a lot of these things are overlooked or only explored when we look at the Jewish narrative films and such. That's where you get those kinds of remembrance of the characters, the music, the art, the culture that they lost. But again, with the slavery thing, we're just looking at kind of mindless, talking a certain way, very ignorant, lower form. And we kind of get this sense that none of them were skilled workers or, you know, intelligent, highly intelligent, scientific people before being enslaved. We kind of forget, and this is something that they do push. Riggsy, you there? You got something to say, brother?
No, just in the part where I was more in depth in that form of because I've been checking up on a lot of things on the forms of the farming, because as you talk earlier, and for me is that not many people knew that there was a lot of farming going on using our women to actually breed to make more men and more women because of the ban on slavery. So like we was talking earlier about some lady that you mentioned about the farming.
Yeah, Martha Brooks.
Yeah, Mom Brooks, and she had many children.
Yeah, she was a breeder. That was my tutor.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah,
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay.
And I was just saying is that with all the children that she had bred at that time, did they scatter them all over the place, or was it she kept them all?
I know that I can confirm 7 children. I haven't. I may have added 2 more. But 7 children. But those children were at the ending part. So this doesn't have anything to do with what she had beforehand.
Okay.
So I actually don't know. What I can say is this: with DNA, when they tell you that somebody is related to you, they give in all of the major apps. So we're talking about Family Tree DNA, 23andMe, and Ancestry. They let you know the DNA. What the DNA does is let you know how close this person is related to you. So we're talking anywhere from first to distant cousin, and it'll give a range of where that person is. My mother is 78 years old, and I'm still finding first and second cousins for her. So with that being said, there are siblings, there are children out there that relate to my mother that we have no idea how they relate to her and being that close in age.
So when you say the direct descendant of a woman, your grandmother. So what I'm saying is, did they take your grandmother away from your great grandmother?
Did they take it? Was her son, and I'm gonna say no, he was not. But he was born in 1865, right when the Civil War ended. Now she had how many children? Was it Rebecca, Brian? I know Rebecca was born as a slave.
Wasn't it 3 or 4 of them were born enslaved, and
3 were born, right? 3 that we found were born enslaved, and then the other 4 was not. But they lived around her. They lived with her. And then there were 2 that were sold with her that I have in this book that shows, and I believe those 2 are her children, but I haven't been able to prove it. So that would be 9.
Because again, when you do this kind of work, you're also looking with dates. So looking at roughly when she was born, and we know that a lot of the enslavers, that as soon as a girl started menstruating, that was it. You were fair game. You were ready to start having kids. There's a big gap between when she would have been about 14 or 15, right, and then her having her first child.
Right.
For our family who are having kids like clockwork, like every 18 months to 2 years.
Yes.
There is a noticeable gap between, like I said, when she could have started having children and when her first actual documented child.
It's about 10 or 12 years, because Rebecca was born in 55. If she was born in 1834, 12 years from that would have been 46. So we're looking at between 46 and 55, there are kids that were born between that time period that we don't know about.
Yeah. And the flip side of that, I was going to say the flip side of that would be my 3 times great-grandfather, Lewis Matthews, who was born about 1820, 1824. Now we know he was a breeder. He was having kids through the whole, when I say he was having kids throughout the whole county. We found 24 of them. Not all of them took his name, which is fine and fair enough, but we found 24. And because of DNA, we suspect that there's another 10 to 15. We're trying to work out how they fit into his story. then Donnie, another man. Is his name John Brown? Who's Brown's first name?
I run
He had
from
100
Brown.
kids.
I run from him. I don't know. I have no idea.
But
But
you see, I
enslaved
have to
Mr.
ask you
Brown.
though,
What you say, Terry?
can you hear me?
Yeah.
I
I
can
wanted
hear
to
you
ask,
now.
right, is there a specific reason why a person will actually breed, or was he kind of like picked because of who he is or what actually he was, or was it something about him that he was chosen to do this, or did he do it on his own accord?
You want me to answer that, Brian?
I would say Lewis. I think Lewis was 50-50. He was an enslaved person, and again, his enslaver was also his father.
Mm-hmm.
He had an unusual degree of freedom to come and go and move around as he pleased. Him, I'm not so sure, and we don't really know anything about Mr. Brown's story. Just the fact that he had 100. Excuse me, that he had 100 kids.
I think my grandmother was chosen, and I'm going just by my feeling. I think my grandmother was chosen because she was a strong woman. I think she was able to have these kids and keep moving. And I'm saying that because I look at my family now. Now, this is my two-time great-grandmother that was doing all this, having all these kids. Let's skip to my actual grandmother. My grandmother had 14 children. My mom is the baby of those 14. She was born in 1898. So these kids were starting to be born because they needed help on the farm. Even though it was after the fact, they were still having these babies because in order for them to get the work done that they needed done, they needed the hands. This was the same reason why breeders started to breed slaves, because they needed the hands. They needed to keep it inside. Since slave trading was now done, still need these slaves because they're going to be old and they're not going to be able to do something or for us. So we need to get that real strong guy and then get this real strong woman and put them together so we can have real strong babies. And if they're not working the way we want, we do what we want with them. It's like what Richard said the other day, and making that comparison to those football players that are on the field right now. I never thought about that until Richard said that. I never thought about the fact that they are the product of the strong enslaved Black man that they were looking for. I never looked at it like that. I never did until he made that comment. But that's what it was. And you had to have a certain type of hip. A woman, it's something about Black women where their hips can spread and keep going. And in my family, we are very shapely women with really nice hips, we're very shapely women. And we have those, what they call slave breeding hips, and keep it going. And so this is what I'm going by when I think of my, bless you. When I think of my great-great-grandmother, this is what I go by. I believe that she was that slave breeding, hip having woman who could just pop them out and keep it moving and pop them out and keep it moving. But she wasn't left to be a dumb woman because she made sure that she was counted in the 1870 census and made sure that she was counted in the 1880 census. So I think they go by what the person looks like, how strong they are, how much they can take, and so on and so forth.
Like a pedigree.
Yes, like a pedigree.
But one myth I would like to dispel, and it kind of came as a surprise even to me, is there's this myth that somehow, at least in America, that Black Americans are, when it comes to children, are prolific. I mean, Donnie read a little bit about the fecundity of the Negro. That was a very nice way of saying we have a lot of kids. Well, I can tell you that the white side of our family, they were having just as many kids. these women were having anything from 8 to 15 kids.
Yep.
Now, okay, they may not have been able to keep it working while they were pregnant, but it still didn't stop them from having huge families. And again, because everything is so entwined and interconnected, not only did we probably get those reproductive genes from the Black side of the family, from the African side, we also got them from the white, we got them from the white side of the family too.
That's right.
Yeah. So in that, when you was doing your research through all these atrocities that you've been going through, do you find that like a lot of people put a blockage for you not to go further than where you're at now?
Yes, I'm laughing because I'm gonna say yes. We've encountered people who have literally come straight out and say, "I'm not related to Black people." Brian and I had the same woman, and she said, "I don't know if we want to put her name out there or not," but she basically said, we're not related. I don't have Black people in my family. I'm not related to Black people, and that's that. Yeah, we definitely have that type of issue. I have another cousin who is trying to get into see a particular collection, and she has yet to been able to see that collection because they keep telling them that it's in process, whereas one white woman was able to go see it, get a picture of this same cousin's, I don't know if he was her great grandfather or great great, but this woman was able to get that picture. Both of these ladies, both Black and white, are paying dues members to this particular society, social genealogical society, but only one of them was able to see this particular collection. That doesn't make any sense. So yeah, we get blocked on a regular. We get blocked. And I think we get blocked because they're afraid that we either want something free about something, or they just don't want to claim us.
So in the county that you're in, and we spoke about like a couple of days ago about people trying to get information, and the county that you're in tried to put a blockage from getting that information out, as if it was a massive threat to them.
Right.
Yeah, that's what Donnie was outlining. Is it really does kind of go down a color line. If you're a person of color, if you're Black, the kind of level of support that you get is different than if you're white. And Donnie gave the perfect example. One woman wanted to see a photograph of her ancestor, and she knew that it was in a special collection. That was her ancestor. They would not let her see it. But a white woman who had no relation to the man could get into the collection, take a picture of that picture, and give it to the Black woman. So there is that. If you want to chuckle, go to the Comes to the Light Facebook page. And when I was promoting the book for Donya, I just came up with these like little stories of some of the ancestors out of the book, and I imagined, I let them kind of write in their own voice. So rather than do something kind of dry, just a little synopsis of their life that reflected the content that was actually in their chapter in the book. And Martha, the breeder, was one of them. And I swear to God, Martha kind of channeled her words through me. I'm sitting there typing, I'm like, okay, Martha, I'm hearing you. She didn't pull her punches. I didn't pull her punches for her. If you want to chuckle, go take a look at some of those comments. Because again, it's a kind of blockage that happens with certain groups of white Americans. Why are you going on about you're racist? That's what one woman said. You're racist. Yeah. Bringing up all the slavery stuff. You're racist. Yeah, you're laughing. I hear someone laughing.
Yep, that's what it was. I was called a racist, like, I don't know how many times just in that one thing, because when like he said, there was no punches pulled, when it came to Miss Martha, what we were trying to explain exactly who she was and her connection. And let me just get into her connection. It's so crazy because I'm actually the third granddaughter to somebody who was so racist that he started a fight on the Senate floor. That's who I stem from. His name is Preston Brooks. I ain't got no problem saying his name because I know I'm related to him. I have blood relative. I have people who connect to my mother on several levels when it comes to the Brooks line. I know that I am a Preston Brooks descendant. And this man was serious. If you look at Terry, you're a historian, so
Yeah.
you would know about a fight that broke out on the Senate floor during the Nebraska-Kansas Act.
Mm-hmm.
That particular fight that broke out on the Senate floor, that was my 3-time great-grandfather that did it. He had to make the decision on whether or not he wanted to approach this man and challenge him to a duel like gentlemen, or just simply say to him, yeah, I didn't like what you said about my uncle and my state, so I'm gonna have to hurt you. Because that's basically what he did. He decided on the latter. I'm gonna have to hurt you. This is what I have to do. You libeled my country, you libeled my gray-haired old uncle. For this you must pay. And he began to beat this man with a cane 30 to 50 times until the cane actually broke over his head. The man's name that he beat was Charles Sumner, the abolitionist. So
Now,
I'm listening to all this. I mean, not listening, but I'm looking at all this. I'm reading all this, and I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. This is who I come from? And then I thought about it. Dang, I made those same comments to somebody not too long ago. And I'm like, oh, I told somebody, if you got a problem with me, come and handle it. So he was like that. This was him. These are the people that we stem from. This is my line, whether they want it to be my line or not. This is my line. And I see myself in him just as much as I see myself in my great-great-grandmother. I do. I have no, and I'm not ashamed of it.
But don't you find, yeah, I was going to say, yeah, don't you find, right, that guys like him that have breeded a lot of women and has a lot of children in one vicinity, that there is a possibility that you may have a relation with a cousin or a brother or a sister?
Go ahead, Brian.
Sorry, I didn't hear the whole question.
Go on, Richie.
No, well, remember when we was having our conversation the other day about meeting relatives unknowingly? Into situations. That's what he was referring to.
Okay. Well, Donnie and I have a running joke. We first started out saying that we would never, ever marry anyone from North or South Carolina, ever. Just because we were just related to way too many people who lived in those states. And then as we started really kind of digging into the genealogy over the years, we now say basically we will never marry anyone on the the whole eastern seaboard is off limits. Detroit, Chicago, Ohio, that's all off limits. Because again, there was a lot of pulses of Black migration out of the South. So it's basically, it starts in the 1870s. They're going to Philadelphia, they're going to Baltimore, they're going to Washington, D.C. And then you have another huge pulse like right around World War II. Basically, well, from the 1920s to World War II. They're going further, back to those places. They're going into Ohio, they're going into Chicago, Detroit, Boston, New York, all the places where they were really hungry for labor. And even today, I'll say, oh, there's a Peterson in Boston. Start digging around. Oh my God, they're a cousin. So yeah, for us, whole bunch of this country, completely off limits.
Right. And the way that a lot of people don't realize how that happens is because of things like breeding and what's going on with the breeding. Like I said, my mom is 78 years old and she has first cousins that she never met until we started researching. She literally, first cousins. I'm talking about the siblings to her parents' siblings. You know, first cousins. That is amazingly crazy to me to have to actually have that go on. And let's go back. Let's talk about Moses. Moses had 45 children. If we have anywhere from 8 to 15 kids anyway, average for every woman in our family. So let's just round it to a regular number of 10. If he had 45 children and each one of those children had 10 children, that's 450 grandchildren right there. This man was having kids along with his children and possibly along with older grandchildren.
You start figuring those 450 had.
Right. So this is why we're so entrenched into discovering things in Edgefield, because we're finding out all of Edgefield County is related, and that Moses could very well be the father to at least 2/3 of them, whereas his grandfather could be the other half, the other portion, the other third. It's
again,
amazing.
This will blow your guys' minds. My first wife, who was a Yorkshire lass, nice girl from Leeds. I found out about 5 years ago that she and I are 10th cousins. I was related to my first wife. Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't even mean to laugh. That just came out.
But this is why I can't try to say to people that we're really a family out here. The thing is, if we're searching for finding our roots, it's much more difficult because we're so intertwined. To actually find the original roots is very difficult.
That's
and
right.
I can see in the American perspective that no matter how you try, there is something that always comes along that blocks it or tries to show you that you're coming from somewhere else. So in that vicinity, as we have the European mixing in, would you say you had a lot of even the Indian, like the American Indians into that equation in your facility?
Absolutely. I mean, I have probably 17 Native Americans on my family tree. A lot of people who come out of where a lot of our cousins, all of us kind of claim Native American from South Carolina, and to varying degrees, it's starting to pop out in people's DNA results. It may not be very much. It may be like 1% or 2%, but it's there. Because again, it's always worth remembering as well, Europeans, well, even though it was illegal to do it, were still enslaving Native Americans along with Black people.
Yeah.
Richie, have you got anything to say about it?
No, not on that. I want to get into the gene side of it, because again, obviously, with all this meeting up with people who are potentially related to you, getting into relationship, what's the impact of that? Because again, these are the subtle nuances that we don't talk about. Again, as you was alluding to earlier, of slavery and the impact of it and how bad it actually was. Because again, we think of the whips, the chains, the beatings, but again, these are the biological, psychological, things that are left now festering over time. So what has been your viewpoint on that side?
Out my thing. I'm just.
Well, I guess I've got two sides to the same coin. So on the one hand, I don't know why it's happening, but on Ancestry.com, I'm tending to get messages from people who identify as white, who just found out that they have a little bit of pepper in the salt shaker. They realize they've got a little bit of African, sub-Saharan African, and they freak out and they send me these messages going, "Oh my God, does this mean that I'm Black?" And I'm like, "Well, it is what it is." You can identify however you want to identify, but it catches them on the hop. And I kind of get where they're coming from, but I also laugh about it because it's like, well, you're automatically saying that somehow Black is lesser. Whether you realize you just said that or not, that's the whole reason why you're freaking out. It's because they've been sold the narrative that somehow being Black is less than.
Oh yes.
Which is hard. And again, it's the as much as people try to be right on and kind of liberal and accepting and inclusive, it's a hard thing if, one, you may not have realized that your ancestors enslaved Black people, or two, even if you did, all of a sudden you now have Black relations where you never knew you had them before. And Americans aren't very good at dealing with certain aspects of reality. It's kind of, I call it the kind of Walt Disneyfication. So long as everything's ticking along and it's really nice and it doesn't have any personal effect on them, they're willing to kind of talk about things. But as soon as you realize that your family is not only wrapped up in enslaving people, but actually fathered children off of slaves, that's a whole other kettle of fish. And again, it comes back to kind of building that narrative and building that framework to kind of have those conversations. But I also think it's a really powerful tool. I mean, it's really, Black genealogy, when it comes to enslaved people, it's like almost every ancestor is an orphan, or is basically either an orphan or an adoptee. They come with no records. And you really have, and it's a challenge, and it's really, really hard to keep chipping away in order to get their stories. One of Donya's favorite saying is, if you can't handle the truth, if you can't wrap your head around the truth, genealogy is not for you.
Genetic genealogy certain isn't for you. If you can't handle what you're about to find, there is no reason for you to even step into it whatsoever. Because when you start doing genetic genealogy, you're getting ready to find siblings possibly that you didn't know about. You're going to find a daddy. These are things that I've come across in doing genetics. And using my mom's DNA, my mom has found 3 women fathers, and they didn't know it. They had no clue.
But do you feel that there's a psychological mindset when you do find out that, okay, one side I have the oppressor, as in forms of a European person being the oppressor, and the other side that I feel that my other side of my family is being oppressed in the format that they were the slaves and whatsoever. Wouldn't that give you a psychological, how can I put it?
I know what you're trying to say, and yes, it would. That's why I say, if you can't handle it, like Brian said, it literally is my favorite saying. If you can't handle the truth, it's no reason for you to get involved. Genealogy, I approach this in my book at the very onset of it. Genealogy is not something that everybody is going to get into. It's not something like when you're a kid, you know how your children say, oh, when I grow up, I'm going to be a fireman, or I'm going to be a doctor, or I'm going to be this. You'll never hear a child say, oh, when I grow up, I'm going to be a genealogist. You're not going to hear it. It's never going to happen. Because number one, it's not even out into the open. Should it happen? Yes, I believe it should. But it's not a known profession like being a doctor, a lawyer, a fireman, a policeman. It's not that kind of profession. And then secondly, because it's not for everybody, it's a chosen field, and it's chosen, this is spiritually speaking now, it's chosen by the ancestors through God. They're the ones that's going to say, you know what, I want this person to do it, or I'm comfortable with them. And once that person really accepts that search, that challenge, it's on and popping. They're gonna do what they're gonna do. Because I wrote a blog the other day, and I said it's a task that's given by our ancestors to those that are doing the research in Edgefield, and we have answered that call. I love every last one of my Edgefield researching family with everything in me, because without them, we wouldn't be where we are. We're at a point in all of our researches where somewhere down the line, we know we're going to end up connecting to each other. And it's amazing. And we have a home place group. It's called Home Place. And this group has about 165 genealogical researchers in it. And all of us are researching one area, and that's Edgefield, South Carolina. And we're finding everything. And I love them. I mean, I love them. Because without them, we would not be where we are. And stories like mine in the Comes to the Light book, that's just scratching the surface. It's not even really scratching the surface. I just gave you the penny to start scratching.
Yeah.
Again, to give you an idea, I mean, to get using my own kind of DNA, I am just over 40% European. I'm not even going to add the 25% Polish Jewish, because as the alt-right will tell you, still an argument about whether European Jews are white or not. So just taking, the 42% European, you would expect that from someone who had one black parent and one white parent. Both of my parents are African American. I have that much. Basically, that 42% is an accumulation of white people and black people having children together, going all the way back to like 1620. And it's just an accumulation. I don't have a single entirely black line. Every single one of my black and mixed race lines ends either in a white man or on some occasions a white woman. And that took me a little while to kind of wrap my head around.
I'm back.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. So, Brian, in what you've seen in the States, have you seen any similarities in the UK?
In terms of like
of what you've achieved in the States, and seeing the atrocities that you've been seeing in the States, have you seen anything similar or heard anything similar in the UK?
I'm going to say no, not to the depth and the degree that it was here. It's kind of. Oh, can you hear me? To explain that a little bit better.
Hey, can you dampen down Daniel's mic?
Yeah.
Wait a minute. I'm trying to hear you. Hold on.
Yeah, go on, Brian.
So when I arrived in England, I didn't realize that I had been traumatized by the country of my birth until I was actually in England. To say that it was like a breath of fresh air. It was like this mountain had been taken off of my shoulders. The first time in my life, I was 22 years old. For the first time in my life, I actually felt as though I was being judged on my character, my empathy, and the kind of skills that I had, more so than the melanin that was in my skin. And that's not to paint the UK as a rosy picture, because I know that there's racism and there's all kinds of ridiculous. But I never thought that I was going to be shot. I never thought that I would walk out of my door and have the confrontation with the Bobby and with me being dead.
Richard.
The 30 years that I was in Britain, I was never called the N-word.
Okay. But yeah, so now going back to North Carolina now. in the things that the things that you have gone through, in your own perspective. Can you hear me?
Sorry, there's a lot of background noise at the moment. I'm just finding it hard to hear.
Not too sure. Richie.
Yeah.
Rich.
Yeah.
I don't know who's got the background noise, but
Can you hear us now?
Can you hear now, Brian?
Oh, much better. Thank you.
All right, go on.
Yeah. There's questions you want to ask Richie, boy.
Yeah. Sorry, I lost my train of thought there.
Right. We were talking about differences between the United States and Britain.
Yeah, and
yeah,
I was just going to simply add, you know, the mind state, I think that you're talking about the difference in how they looked again is reflected, I think, that during obviously the main bulk of slavery, people have to remember that over here in the UK, it was banned here. So even though, as I said, it wasn't rosy, it was still hard times on the boulevard, as they say. It was a different mindset was already put in place. And again, me and Terry have had dealings with author over here who's written a book called The Blackamoors, where he documents the history of Europe and blacks around and in Europe during the 15 and 1600s. Yeah, Tel?
Yeah, and even they had a documentary where one of the guys came out even on Channel 4, which he came out and they were saying, where is all the black people of the Victoria and Tudor times have gone? And when you really actually find out, you find out that majority of them are European lookalikes now. But one thing that I'm always trying to relate is that how the things that have been happening in the States. Now, what I've realized is for the UK, it didn't happen in the UK as in the farming, but what they did was more to the Caribbean. So majority of people in the Caribbean that they did the farming would have been pulled into the UK through the Windrush. So there is a possibility, as I said, like how you have it in the States, it would have happened in the Caribbean, but the set of people that it happened to would have come to the UK, not realizing that this is what was happening in the Caribbean.
No, that's true. Plus, you know,
go on, Brian.
I guess I have to because I remember when I was dating a West Indian girl, her parents had come over to London, I think in the 50s, like the really early 1950s. Mm-hmm. And her parents were telling me about what they had to go through when they first got to the UK. You know, they said, you know, it wasn't just West Indians. Pakistanis had to go through it. Indians were going through, you know, anyone who had black or brown skins that were coming from the colonies, all descending on kind of Britain at the same time, really had a really rough time of it. And I do not dismiss what a hard time that generation of Black Britons kind of went through. I would have to say that it just struck me that the Black community in Britain was a lot more cohesive and together than the Black community here. And I'll use one example. I can't remember how many years ago it was, but there was that Black lad that got shot in Tottenham. I remember it all kicked off for a whole week. It all kicked off. And for Donnie, just to explain to Donnie, that doesn't happen very often in Britain. But I think that was like the second or third death of a Black teen at the hands of a white policeman over like a 2-year period. And as I said, it all kicked off, the riots and all the rest of it. But how quickly did the government change policing laws to try to prevent that happening again over in Britain?
So, Richie, have we got anything more to talk about? No. Anything beautiful, anything in mind?
Listen, I just want to take the time at this point in time of the show, not only to thank the art speakers and guests because they've been going in, giving us some beautiful background information, making us aware of our possible routes, and obviously, as we always like to do, spark up your mind to the thought that you yourself can go out and research your own family tree, find out your own history, find out the importance of your own bloodline. And also, I want to say thank you to all the people that have been watching. Much appreciated as always. Uh, Don, you there? Still, my dear? Are you still with us?
She must be then ready.
No. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, my dear. That's all.
Hear me?
But hopefully,
Hello?
we've inspired people to go out there and do their research. And again, there's wonderful resources. Donnie has spoken about a few of them. There's all kinds of genealogical groups on Facebook. People, once you start kind of going into those groups, people are happy to collaborate, answer questions if they can, point out resources to go to. Because again, Black genealogy, and I'm sure Donnie will speak to this, we're sold a narrative, at least here in America, that it's like next to impossible to do. Well, it's not. It's harder. I ain't gonna lie. It is
Right.
harder, much more of a challenge. But if you keep working at it, and you get a better understanding of what information you have, where you can go to access records, what groups you can ask questions to. If I can get back to an enslaved ancestor who was born in Pennsylvania in 1692, anyone can do this. It's just
Exactly.
have the will and the desire to do it.
Exactly. And that's one of the main things that you have African Americans say here. They will say, well, I don't have a connection. I don't have a background because all of my information was taken away from me. Everything was taken away from me and my family. We didn't have a name. We don't have this. We had to take on the slave master's name and so on and so forth. We don't have a history before 1870. I think Brian and I have proved that wrong on this show alone when talking about somebody like Moses Williams from 1769. This man saw the revolution. I mean, Brian made a statement. Actually, he spoke for Moses one time in our Comes to the Light page as well, where Moses saw the changing of clothing to the changing of everything. I mean, this man saw everything. He was wearing trousers at one point. What was it? Trousers first?
Breeches. He was wearing breeches and then
Yes,
trousers.
breeches first, and then to trousers, and then to regular pants. This man saw so much. This man saw the Revolutionary War. He saw the Civil War. He saw the War 1812. He saw the Mexican War. He saw all of these things. He was witness to all of these things, and we found him. So he saw freedom. Let's not leave that out. He saw freedom. He lived some time, 20 years past it. So we can't sit up here and say that we don't have a history, because I have one, and it's marvelous and it's awesome and I love it, and I can't wait to find out more about it. And I'm glad that I'm doing the search that I'm doing, because this segment is called The Legacy in Our DNA. Well, this is what I'm leaving to my children. This is my legacy, to let them know that, and to the rest of my family that I found, to let them know that we made a huge impact in this world, one that no one can ever take away from us. And now they can't take it away because we found it. Before they took it away because we didn't know anything about it. Well, guess what? You have 165 family members in a home place group that is finding your history. This is for everybody that's listening right now, for Edgefield, South Carolina. They're finding your history. They're finding who you are, where you came from, and everything, and letting you know that we were more than just slaves. We were more than people who were enslaved. We were everything. We come from everything. And it's just a wonderful thing to me.
And how crazy is this? Again, keeping with the theme of the legacy of DNA. I am either directly related to or a cousin of every single American president that
That's
there has
right.
ever been. including the incumbent, although we don't discuss that at the dinner table, unfortunately. But
Right.
the framers of the Constitution, the framers of the Declaration of Independence and the American Bill of Rights, I'm either directly descended from or related to every single one of them. That's
Yes,
in
we
my
are.
DNA. That's what I remind. So I remind my nieces and nephews, if someone gets in your face and tells you go back to Africa or you don't belong here, you tell them. Every single president, I'm related to him. One way, shape, or
That's right.
form, I'm related to him. This is as much my country as it is anyone else's.
That's right.
And that's the power of DNA, knowing that, being able to confront ignorance just by saying that. Because I'm waiting for someone to tell me, you don't like living in the States? Go back to Africa. Why? I can't wait to hit them with it.
Uh,
No, no, very powerful, very powerful. Listen, I want you to, Brian, first especially, tell the people where they can find you and any products or places that they can come and watch you, hear you speak. Just go in on that for us, and then we'll do D as well. And just
and the book.
That's it. We'll remind the people where they can get the book and whatever afterwards.
For me, if anyone Googles my name, Brian Sheffey, SHEFF for Freddie, EY, and Genealogy Adventures, you'll get the website, you'll get all the social media links, including my little YouTube channel. So yeah, that's the best way to find me.
for me, I can be Googled as Donya Williams. You'll probably come up with things like We Are Yeldales, but I want people to really focus on Comes to the Light. Comes to the Light has an Instagram, a Twitter, a Facebook, and a YouTube channel. So Comes to the Light, that's the best way to find me, is through Comes to the Light. And then you can purchase the book on Amazon.com, Barnes and Noble. And if you want the book personally, like signed to you, just send me an email to Comes to the Light. Send me your email address to Comes to the Light at, well, ooh, this is a long email, but it's comes to the light, LATFOESC @gmail.com. Send your email address to me, and then I'll just send you an invoice. And this way the book will come straight from me, and I can give you an autograph. I'll be able to mail you an autographed book. It's going to cost you a little bit more because of shipping, but that's where you can definitely get it.
Yeah, we'll put the email under the show.
Huh?
I said we will put the email under the show so that people can get through and contact you.
Okay.
And the book is also available for sale online in the UK. So if you go to Barnes & Noble or Amazon.co.uk, you can actually buy it in country.
Yep, you sure can.
Listen, this has been a big show, a very big show. The chat room has loved it. We've had some positive comments. We've had brothers and sisters from here in the UK and across the water. So it's been a very nice show. People have enjoyed it. Terry, before we go, just reminding people of where to go for their black products, please.
As I always say, buy black, live black, put your hand as a black person, put your hand in your pocket as a black person, go to a shop as a black person, and purchase from a black person. Because that's the only way we're going to grow. Like as we have stores in Shepherd's Bush, 10 Adelaide Road, the Ankwobi. All you have to say is Sister Ivy. And she will say back to you, where did you get this from? And you just say, Mr. Riggs sent me here. And you can get any products you want, from soaps to incense to creams to DVDs to books, and she even does classes. Or you can go to Pampanzi, Brixton Hill, which he sells products, books, clothes, painting, artwork, and every single product is done by black people. And he has a restaurant called Return to Eden, which you can buy food and supplements. Then there is Station Road, Nata Vitel. He sells products. He sells books. Keep on buying from these stores. You even have the electrolytes on Brixton Hill next to Pansy. You have 22 in West Kensington. You have as many shops, even the Matt's Hat Centre in Tottenham Court, High Road, which is a big, massive bookstore, and the Pan-African Centre. They need help. Keep on providing. There is schools. Take your children to Adult Manhood Academy, Origin, and Brother Minkley's Saturday schools. As much as you can try to help this economical system to grow, we need as much information, we need logic, we need inspiring, we need to move together as one family. So, as I always say, UK tour guide to the rest of the world. As I'm off to Belgium, I will speak to you soon, and keep on subscribing, liking, and sharing this link. So, Richie, it's all in your hands because I've got to get out of here.
Terry's off to Belgium. Yeah, people doing his thing, European tours, keeping him moving. Hopefully, we might hear from him tomorrow. There may be a show. Look out for that. It's in the pipe works right now. It may have the one and only Robin Walker, but we will see. We're trying to sort that out now. I want to say big up to my fellow black media. Black News 102, Sarnet TV, HMP TV, Got Kush TV, Talk with the Titans, content over everything. On the Saturday school side of the game, African Sons and Daughters down in Stratford doing a Saturday school. Big up to them. And yeah, just support black. It's all black everything. That's what we're trying to achieve here. Understanding through our past, bring it to the future, do something constructive with it. This is Black Eyes TV signing out, people. Peace.
Bye.
Bye-bye.